All right, thank you again, everyone, for taking the time out of your busy days to join us. We've got some great info for you, and I'm going to keep it as concise as possible so you all have time to ask questions if you've got them. My name's Samantha Francis. I'm the marketing manager here at Talon, and my boss, the senior director of operations here, Byron Branning, will be hosting this webinar for you guys today. To give you a little bit of insight, Byron, heading up our operations department, has our HR director as his direct report. Last spring, our company was considering ways to recognize opportunities to amplify our employee engagement and identify key influencers on our project teams. In doing so, and thanks in large part to the fact that we have a data and analytics practice, we discovered a way to use all the data we have on our employees in a single instance to provide the results we were looking for. I'll get back to why the marketing manager and director of operations are hosting a somewhat tech-focused event in a moment, but for now I do want to go over a few housekeeping items. So first things first, you all have access to the chat pane on the right-hand side of your screen. Please feel free to ask your questions throughout. We will hold off on answering them until the end, but the window is public-facing, so your question might resonate with someone else and spark a question on their end. We are recording this session and we'll be sending it out after we're through, so if you miss anything or find that a colleague might enjoy the content, you will have the ability to review and share it as you please. I work for Talon, and we're a software development firm who specializes in consultative services. We work very closely with Microsoft, and we've got expertise in the cloud, integrations, user experience, web, mobile, and AI development, and data and analytics. Custom development is really where we shine, but sometimes software isn't even the answer. It could be as simple as a process change, and that's really what we take pride in, using our experiences and gaining the trust of our clients so that they come to know us as partners. So now you know a little bit about who we are and how this event came to be. Now I get to tell you about how we hijacked this webinar from our data team and convinced them to let Byron and myself dig into this for you. Our VP of Data and Analytics is very brilliant, but I convinced him to let us present this to you because we've been on the sidelines with him throughout this learning experience and process, and I think Byron and I have a pretty good handle on how to get the message across. Today we'll start with trends in analytics. From there, you'll get to hear with Byron about people analytics, and he's going to walk you through what we discovered works for us. After that, we'll move on to HR, data, opportunities and responsibilities, and finally to now what. So data and HR have gone hand in hand forever. The media is introducing this notion that using data in the HR department is some new focus, when in reality, the only thing that's new, and it's not new so much as it's just more accessible now, is the ability to take and manage our data and analyze what it can teach us in a quicker, easier way. And that's thanks in large part to technology. That being said, analytics are in fact trending, and HR is one of the business units that tops the list of departments driving business intelligence. Back in 2013, HR wasn't in the top 5. Not surprising, HR sat second to last on the list between supply chain and manufacturing. Again, this is not surprising. There's really nothing seemingly strategic about those functions. Materials move in, product moves out, people come in, people move out. Fast forward 5 years, in 2018, nothing had changed. The good news, however, is that unlike many other departments, HR has shown the most growth in this area over the past few years, and it continues to trend upward. Looking a little closer, you can see that HR has experienced the most significant growth in terms of using data. Finance has remained flat, while HR leads the pack with over 7% growth. So it is something HR departments need to keep an eye on. Digital information is available in real time and at our fingertips, so we don't have an excuse not to use it to the best of our ability, especially with the way the job market is right now. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, as of September, the non-farm unemployment rate was 3.5%. A lot of examples today we're going to provide for you relate to attrition simply because of that fact. It's something every company needs to consider, but in times like these, keeping your employees, especially your top performers, is likely critical. Now it's my pleasure to turn the mic over to Byron, who will take you through people analytics.
Thanks, Sam. So you've heard a bit about the trends we're seeing in analytics and how HR is moving up the priority list. Human resources is people, so let's talk about people analytics. Back in June, Sherm published an article focusing on the surge in people analytics technologies. A statistic within that article reinforced everything we're talking about. People analytics has risen as a key priority for over 80% of organizations. So what does that mean? What are people analytics? If you drill into HR, you see people data everywhere: recruiting, employee demographics, performance, compensation, and retention. From a recruiting perspective, you have an individual's work history, not only where they worked, but how long they worked there. For employee demographics, you have an individual's tenure with a company, tenure in their current role, where they live, how long their commute is, and the size of the family unit. For performance, you have data from reviews, check-ins, feedback, overall ratings, promotions, etc. And for compensation, you have current salary, last increase, dates and amounts, bonus details, their salary in comparison to their peers, etc. All of these factors, all of this data, all of these variables influence two things: retention and attrition. So while we're on the subject, let's talk about attrition. Every quarter at Talon, we look at our attrition numbers, first in comparison to the previous quarter, and then in comparison to the same period for the year before. We always ask ourselves, is this good or is this bad? For purposes of this, we're going to focus on the latter. For every company, bad attrition is really bad. You're losing your key players, the people you turn to in a pinch. If given the choice, you would do whatever it takes within reason to keep them. For Talon, it's no different. It weakens our project teams, disrupts communications, slows forward progress, impacts morale, and increases costs. So how do you get ahead of it? You want to understand why. Why are you experiencing bad attrition? To answer that question, you need to look at all the variables that are in play. It's the same variables that are in the form of the people data we reviewed earlier: work history, tenure, time and position, etc. If you have all the data, this should be easy. For most companies, the problem is the data is all over the place. It's the same for us. In our HRS system, in our performance management system, in our exit interviews, in our employee surveys, it would take an army of people to piece it all together. However, using a simple analysis of a handful of variables, you can identify some key risk points. When you put the data together and begin to analyze the variables, patterns will begin to emerge. In this very basic example, persons E and F resigned, citing the commute time to work as the single determining factor for their resignation. When applying that risk factor to the rest of the employee populations, persons B and D emerge as a risk. Why? Because their commute time is the same as or greater than the two people that just resigned. Imagine taking that relatively straightforward and easy example and expanding it to connect all of your data sources to a tool that allows you to analyze all the data points together. Imagine how powerful it would be to have access to the information that allows you to identify your risk factors, the severity of those risk factors, and ultimately which employees are at risk. Perhaps for some companies, the risk factors and associated turnover is the normal course of business. If nothing else, it reinforces your assumptions. For others, it enables you to identify emerging trends and take action against them. If employees are leaving because their commute time is too long, instituting a work-from-home policy or flexible work schedule may be the answer. But without analyzing the data, you may be left scratching your head and wondering, why are my superstars walking out the door? In this example, we used Power BI to analyze our exit interview data across different regions and positions within the company. We noticed that consultants' biggest complaints were by far limited PTO, a sentiment not shared by other positions. Perhaps this was because the more recent hires hadn't had a chance to accrue time. Perhaps in some cases they weren't aware that our policy allows them to borrow against time they haven't yet accrued. Or maybe our PTO policy wasn't in line with market. Through the analysis, we were able to identify a risk factor and use it to explore opportunities to address it. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Sam to drill into some of the opportunities and responsibilities.
Thanks, Byron. So moving on to opportunities and responsibilities, I really wanted to insert an image of Jack Nicklaus as Frank Costello from The Departed here to show that you HR leaders are really the embodiment of heavy lies the crown. But thinking of my audience, I might be better suited going with a Spider-Man line and say that with great power comes great responsibility. Either way, I maintain my theory. So much success from every business comes from the HR department. You all pay attention to the people that keep the companies running. You notice things that many career managers don't, and then you have to lay down the law among all the other tasks you're required to manage and are still asked for more. So let's move on to something that can help make your life easier. The opportunities that data cultivates are significant. Historically, not just HR, but all operational departments have reacted to situations they've found themselves in. Someone quits, we counteroffer, or we ask for an exit interview. When someone submits a request for vacation, their manager approves or denies it. Ask and answer. With the amount of data available at our fingertips now, being proactive is the future. Instead of waiting for someone to quit, the warning signs are there. So how can we intervene? Stay interviews? If an employee has taken vacation the second week in July for the last 5 years, chances are that's when they're going to place the request this year. At Talon, for example, billable hours are our income. If we can anticipate that that second week in July is going to be a low billing week because of employee vacations, can we plan to sub out our consultants? Can we kick off new projects with alternate staff? We ask ourselves, what are our pain points? What can we see? Where should we focus? And how can it help? But I think it's time to change the questions, and in doing so, your position. Maybe instead of what can we see, we ask what we aren't seeing. Those questions have been daunting in the past. If you aren't seeing something, how do you even know? Where do you look? Leaning on your data makes that all easier. If we see the same things each time we run a report on employee attrition and see the same trends year after year, it should raise a red flag, not give us comfort. Challenging the status quo is what keeps us agile in moving forward in our processes and towards our goals. It's about shifting our thought process, and that's really the tough part about navigating this new landscape. So we know that there's data everywhere, and now we know that we can collect it and have it all in one place. First, I want to remind you that collecting this data isn't an added step to any process you already have in place. It's being collected already. And once you set up a reporting structure, all you have to do is look for patterns, evaluate trends, and analyze what you already know. Refocusing on our attrition example from earlier, industry benchmarks are a great resource to measure against. Let's think back about the employees whose commute time became longer. Compared to industry benchmarks, this was a warning sign. The career manager has the opportunity now to be proactive. Perhaps they should meet with this employee and suggest a work from home day. There's concern that automation will eliminate jobs, when in reality, automation is something that will foster a more productive environment, and it will nurture the human element of human resources. Before moving on, I want to take a second to recap what we've reviewed so far and hopefully confirm that we've gotten the point across that analyzing data can seem intimidating, but it shouldn't be. We've gone over trends in analytics and have proven that HR is one of the primary departments driving business intelligence. We've displayed that HR is actually the only department over the past 3 years trending upwards in terms of driving BI, and Byron went over an example using employee attrition as the use case of how the tool we found success with has helped our HR department and created easy reporting and real-time access to our own employee data. We've discussed your opportunities and responsibilities as HR leaders, and now I think we're in a pretty solid place to move forward. So now I hope you feel a little bit better than you did before you joined us today. I'm optimistic, again, as a non-technical person, that we've conveyed that, quote, navigating data in HR, which is what we call this webinar on purpose, now seems significantly less daunting. That being said, the future is now, and it is time to start thinking about what your move is going to be. This is something we can help you with. So I'm going to arm you after this webinar with resources to continue educating yourself. I've done the research. There are tons of published articles on this topic, but I don't know that any one solution is going to fit all of your needs. Your needs could be industry specific. They could be seasonal, for example. This is the beginning of why and how we have data in so many different places. No one HR platform is built for every organization. So on the plus side, this gives you options. On the downside, you've got to sift through them. But this is where educating yourself is so important. You need to prioritize and then strategize, because chances are that even when you've figured out where to start using your data to do some of the work for you, you're going to need to sell that idea to someone and get their approval. So consider your team, consider your goals, and identify something of a roadmap for adoption. This is something we can help you with. We've done it before. Well, I have not done it before. Luckily for you, this is as far as they let me go. But we have a brilliant data and analytics team that have done it before. So maybe consider outsourcing the help. An impartial third party might be just what you need to provide perspective. My hope is that you all feel a little bit more confident, both in the fact that you're not alone, but also, and more importantly, I hope you feel empowered by the fact that you have data to evaluate. It's already there, and now maybe you feel even better about analyzing it and suggesting it to the other leaders at your company, ways to improve retention or culture, or any of the many things that you're tasked with focusing on at any given time. So expect an email like I promised. I've got a bunch of things for you to use to back requests you might have, but in that email, I'm also going to ask you to complete a survey. It will give us a better idea on how we did today, what you might want to learn in the future, if you want our help, where you might want to begin, and most of all, I want to know how technical you thought this was, because while I'm in marketing, I do work for a software company, and I want to make sure we're delivering on our promise.